A few years ago, I heard a story from a man who has spent most of his life teaching the Scriptures. He's become well known as a speaker, and he is continually drawing people into the life of faith, trying to help them understand the mysteries of the Bible, to live out more fully what the Bible asks of those who belong to God. And he is often at conferences and teaching and preaching to people all around the world. And a couple of years ago, I heard him tell the story of a time when he was particularly exhausted. He had been speaking for a while, and he was getting on a plane to go home for some much-needed rest for the first time in a while. So he got situated on the plane, he got his headphones on, he got his book out, and he was ready to settle in and not talk to anybody. And right after he got himself situated, a young woman came and sat next to him and started crying. And so here's this man talking about living the gospel, teaching other people, not wanting to be bothered, and here's this young woman clearly in need. He heard the voice of God kind of push him out of his temptation to not say anything. And that voice that spoke in his heart said, "It's a good thing she's sitting next to a disciple of Jesus. It's a good thing she's sitting next to a disciple of Jesus." And so, convicted by this reminder from God, he took off his headphones and he began to hear her story, because she had just lost her brother in an unexpected death. She was traveling to be with her family and obviously distraught. And here was a man who was able to show the very compassion of Christ because he had built his life to be a follower of Christ, a disciple, someone who hears the voice of God so that he can speak in a way that reflects the power of God. This is what we are celebrating today, in fact. The celebration of confirmation is a recognition that we are here because we are disciples of Jesus. Jesus desires that every person in the world come to know him. And the way that he wants to accomplish this growing knowledge of who he is us. We are to be his voice, his witness, his hands at work in the world. This is what he means when we hear him say in today's gospel, "You are to be salt, you are to be light." Salt is something that gives flavor, something that preserves, something that was understood in the time of Jesus to be necessary for life itself. You are necessary for life itself because you belong to me. You are light, because too many people suffer in darkness. Too many people struggle to be able to discover the richness of a life with God, because of the pain like that young woman on the plane was experiencing. Lucky for her, she was sitting next to a disciple of Jesus, a man of salt and light, a man who brought comfort. This is what God asks of us. And the celebration of confirmation is not the completion of your prep. What happens today is not that you end the work you have been doing on confirmation. What happens today is that you begin to be salt and light. And you begin to accomplish the work that God has for you with the grace that God gives you, with the very power of God at work in you. You are to be salt and life. In the letters that you wrote to me for your preparation for this day, you responded to the question I asked, what is it that young people struggle with today? And I can tell you that many of the answers that you shared with me are things that old people struggle with today too. The difficulty of navigating this life, the reality of knowing about God and struggling to commit as fully, the pain of not being certain and dealing with how other people treat us, and a hope that these struggles will somehow be strengthened because of what God is doing. This can happen, but it doesn't happen magically. It happens because you make a choice. If you come here today and you don't make a choice, well, then what happens today probably isn't going to be that long lasting. But if you make a choice, if you choose to say yes to being a disciple of Jesus, well, then things change in your life. Then you can, in fact, draw from the strength that God gives. Because God, He provides the grace. But we have to cooperate with God. We have to choose day in and day out to be salt or light, because it's very possible, as Jesus warns, for us to receive all the gifts that God wants and then cover them over with a bushel basket. Cover over the light so that it is not seen. This is the warning that He gives. Whenever you leave the church today and you face the next challenge of your life, God is there in a new way. When you walk into the life of another person and find them struggling, then God says to you, good thing that they are with a disciple of Jesus. We also have a powerful reminder that this is the plan of God in our first reading. So long before Jesus ever taught anything, God was already shaping His people to understand who Jesus is. And so He gives us prophets. The prophets point to who we are supposed to be. They point to a time when the power of Jesus makes possible everything God desires. And so we have today these words of the prophet Isaiah. If you remove from your midst oppression, false accusation, and malicious speech, then light shall rise for you in the darkness. So these words were written thousands of years ago. As you look at your world today, as you look at your life today, let's see if these things are still a problem. Around you, do you find any malicious speech? Does that happen? It seems to happen more and more and more. One of the challenges of young people that you identify is the connection we have to technology that we can use for such good purposes, and yet at the same time can weigh us down because it so easily makes malicious speech possible. Do we have around us now false accusation? Is that part of the struggle of our life? Is there oppression? Are there people who struggle because those around them that should support them fail? Because those that could help them thrive prevent them? Does that happen today? This is part of the reality of living in this world. This is the exact reality that Jesus sends us into and says, you be salt and light. He says, you are a disciple of mine. You can reflect light where there was otherwise darkness. Isaiah also gives us a way to respond. It's not only that we should be better equipped to deal with oppression and false accusation and malicious speech. He says also, share your bread with the hungry. Shelter the oppressed and the homeless. Clothe the naked when you see them. Do not turn your back on your own. This is the work of a disciple. And what happens for you today, being confirmed, is that God expects you to begin this work, to start living fully as a disciple of Jesus. Fully as someone who recognizes the need of others, who speaks words of light instead of destruction, who reminds the world that there is something good we are made for. That reminder can be the very thing that brings light where otherwise there would be darkness. Now, finally, I want to give you one thought to help connect all of this. One thought to help you maybe tomorrow and the next day and each day rise to the occasion of being a disciple, because the challenges surround us continually, but our temptation is to do nothing. And here's the thought that we have to pay attention to. Because very often, when we are faced with the need of another person, the thought is, I don't have time to be bothered with that. How often have every one of us here seen the need of another person and thought, I don't have time to be bothered with that? That was the thought of the evangelist on the airplane when the young woman started crying and he was tired. I don't have time to be bothered with that. But what he heard instead was the reminder of Jesus, good thing she's sitting next to my disciple. You are here today because we are celebrating our faith. Celebrating that God gave us life in the beginning and it furthers that life by the grace of the sacraments. You are a disciple. And so the next time you hear that temptation that says, I don't have time to be bothered with this, remember the voice of Jesus that calls you to respond differently, to be better, to be more, to be a disciple, to bring light where there was darkness, to bring flavor to the world because you live differently, because you have taken up the call of the people of God to share your bread with the hungry, to shelter the oppressed and the homeless, to remove from your midst oppression and false accusation and malicious speech. This is possible because of what God gives you. So our gathering today is meant to transform the world, to bring light where there is darkness. Because lucky for the world around you, you are a disciple of Jesus.